Before we talk about some of the mistakes that I see people make time and time again when it comes to their ISA, let's look at some of the ISA rules for this new financial year. But bear in mind that this information is relevant at the time of the video and rules are subject to change. So you should seek professional help if you need it, because this video does not constitute financial advice. The main advantage of an ISA is that money that is invested inside it is completely protected from tax. This means that you don't have to pay any capital gains tax or dividend income tax on your investments ever. As you know, there are 4 types of ISAs available at the moment, and each tax year we get a total ISA allowance of £20,000 that we can spread across these accounts. So if you want some in cash, some in stocks and shares, and some in the other 2, that's fine, as long as the overall amount contributed doesn't exceed £20,000 per year. Jeremy Hunt did announce plans to launch a new British ISA designed to encourage investment in UK companies, the proposal being to give investors an extra £5,000 allowance on top of the current £20,000, but these 4 are the ones that we have available at the moment. And of course, you can already invest in UK companies and more with the existing stocks and shares ISA, which is the one that I tend to focus on. Now, as of April 2024, here are the rules for ISAs. Despite some calls for an increase in annual allowances, the government has frozen these limits for the new tax year. This means that the overall ISA allowance will stay at £20,000 per year. And as I said earlier, you can currently split your allowance across these 4 types of accounts. The junior ISA allowance will stay at £9,000 per year, and any money you save into a junior ISA does not affect your own £20,000 allowance. In theory, if you max up your allowance of £20,000, it's possible to build up £1 million or more in an ISA if you manage to get good returns on your investments over time. So it's very important, if you have the money, to consider maxing out your ISA. The second thing you need to be aware of is that there is now greater flexibility to pay into the same type of ISA with different providers. This will make it easier to have ISAs of the same type in different places in the same tax year. This is great because it could offer cash ISA savers the chance to go after more competitive rates more easily, or pick and mix easy access and fixed rates. It also helps protect those who accidentally pay into more than one of the same type of ISA in a single tax year. This is easy to do when you're paying by direct debit, so the change removes that risk of breaking the rules. Another new rule that comes into effect from April 2024 is that you're allowed partial transfers of ISA funds between providers, no matter when you pay the money in. This will give ISA savers and investors greater flexibility and control. The current rules force an all or nothing approach to current year ISA transfers. You have to transfer your entire ISA of that type from the current tax year, or nothing at all. But this change means that you'll be in charge of how much you want to transfer, no matter when you made the subscription. So say you wanted to take 5k out of your Vanguard stocks and shares ISA and transfer it to an Invest Engine ISA. You could do that at any point during the year now. But it's worth noting that you still won't be able to pay in more than your annual ISA allowance. The next rule implemented in the new tax year is that there will be no need to reapply for existing ISAs each year. At the moment, ISA savers and investors are required to reapply for ISAs they already hold when there's been a gap of 1 tax year where they've not made any contribution. So removing this rule should reduce the potential for confusion and cut down on unnecessary red tape. The other change to be aware of is that the age for when you can open a cash ISA is changing. You can currently open a cash ISA when you turn 16, but this will be 18 from April 2024. And of course, 16 and 17-year-olds will still be able to open and save into a junior ISA. Now, one change that everyone expected to happen is that fractional shares are now approved by HMRC. What this means is that you now have the option to buy a fraction of an ETF share, for example, rather than buying the whole unit. This could allow investors who might otherwise have been priced out of certain shares to hold these fractional investments in an ISA. So these are the ISA rules for the new financial year. But it's important to be aware of some of the mistakes that many people make when managing their ISAs, to avoid them in the future. Otherwise, they can cost you a lot of money. When switching to a new ISA, it's vital to go through the process to transfer your ISA funds rather than withdrawing the cash and then putting it into the new account, as this latter option will use up your annual allowance. It's really easy to make this mistake, as it seems like the most obvious course of action, and this may be less of an issue for those with smaller ISA pots, as they're unlikely to use their allowance in full anyway. But it's a headache for those with larger ISA holdings, as making the wrong move could see you lose the tax-free status on a very large chunk of money, making you liable for unnecessary tax charges. So pay really close attention to this and make sure that if you want to move to another provider, you follow the right procedures. This typically involves contacting the ISA provider you want to move to and filling out an ISA transfer form to move your account. Some providers can just transfer the investments as they are without the need to sell them into cash first, but that's up to each firm. If you withdraw the money from your existing ISA first without doing this to then put it into the new account, you will not be able to reinvest that part of your tax-free allowance again. Your provider can help walk you through the process, so reach out to them if you're unsure what steps to take. Another quick point to mention, which is related to this, is whether transferring the money to another provider will affect your year's allowance. Well, in short, no, it will not. Let's run through an example. Let's say you want to move your stocks and shares ISA from free trade to Vanguard. You've got £10,000 in free trade that you've built up over the years, and you've just deposited £10,000 in Vanguard, leaving you with £10,000 in allowance for the year. Now, once you go through the correct transfer procedure and the transfer is completed, that amount will not count towards the current year's allowance. So your £10,000 from free trade will be added to the existing £10,000 on Vanguard, bringing the total to £20,000 in your account. But you will still have £10,000 in the current year's allowance to use, because you've technically only used £10,000 so far. Again, if you're not sure how this works in practice, just check with your provider what the procedure is. Next, let's discuss withdrawing funds from your ISA and how it affects your allowance. Here's where the confusion lies with this one. Say you take some money out of your stocks and shares ISA now, and then a few months later you put more money in. There is a misconception that this will not affect your allowance, but the reality is that this will count towards your limit. For example, let's say you have £10,000 in your stocks and shares ISA. You withdraw £5,000 now to cover some unexpected expenses, let's say, and then a month later you put that £5,000 back in. So out of your £20,000 allowance, you've used up £10,000, you have then taken out £5,000, leaving you with £5,000 in the ISA. But then you topped up again with that additional £5,000, bringing you back to £10,000. So you should have £10,000 left to use for the year, right? Well, not really, because that extra £5,000 that you topped up your account with will be counted as an additional deposit, meaning that you've deposited a total of £15,000, taking your allowance down to £5,000 for the year. Now, here's the thing. There are some providers out there who offer flexible ISAs, whereby you can take out cash and then put it back in during the same tax year without reducing your current year's allowance. So if you can afford to max out your ISA and want to have this option, look out for those. Just before we move on to the next point, if you're enjoying this video and you've made it this far, please do subscribe. It really does help out small UK channels like mine. Thank you. The next point is more of a reminder that the £20,000 available is just the limit of what you can put in per year. What happens with the money after that is entirely tax-free. So if you have invested £7,000 into a stocks and shares ISA for the year, and then you earn some miraculous returns that will grow that money to £25,000, for example, technically you still have £13,000 left to invest for the year. The idea here is that if you've put less than £20,000 into your ISA and that amount grows to over £20,000 in a single year, you won't have to pay tax on the difference. All that counts is how much you've actually contributed. Anything else is yours to grow as much as possible. So this one is simple and I wouldn't worry too much about it. Now, a more important point to be aware of is about moving dividends in and out of your stocks and shares ISA. The current rules state that all of your dividend income inside an ISA is completely tax-free. And on top of that, any dividends reinvested do not count as new money into an ISA. So if you have £5,000 in an ISA and you get £500 in dividends, you can choose to reinvest that money tax-free without reducing the allowance for the year. However, if you choose to receive those dividends as cash into your bank account and then later on decide you want to add them into your ISA, that will count towards your allowance. So be careful in that regard and make sure that if you want to reinvest your dividends, you do it the right way. Most platforms offer automatic reinvestment options, so it's worth checking with your provider. The last point I want to make is that any money you pay into a stocks and shares ISA can be held as cash, then invested when you're ready. Cash in a stocks and shares ISA shouldn't be thought of as a long-term option, but it can be a useful solution while you're choosing what to invest in. There is often a lot to think about when it comes to making investment decisions, so securing your ISA allowance with cash as soon as possible gives you time to do your research. Provided the cash is loaded into the ISA before the tax year end, it is considered part of the current tax year's allowance. You can then make investment decisions on your own timeline, even if that happens in the next tax year. This being said, it might not be the best idea to make last-minute lump sum investments instead of spreading payments through the tax year. We're likely to fare much better in the long run if we drip feed money into an ISA rather than leaving it until the last minute to make a lump sum contribution at the end of the tax year. There are two clear reasons for this. First is compounding, where your returns generate returns of their own, which can work its magic a lot more powerfully when your money has time to accumulate, meaning that the longer your money is held into your ISA, the more it can make for you. So getting in early is important. And then by making regular payments means you're less likely to try to time the market, which is a big mistake made by many investors, because attempting to spot the best time to invest can end up costing you. One final mistake that I want to mention is that many people just pay way too much for their ISAs. So make sure to check out this video next to learn about some of the best stocks and shares ISAs available for us in 2024.